Alright, so welcome back here. I think this topic will be tied to something along the lines of Christianity and violence. I'll find a nice way to capture it all because there's a lot that can go into this. I actively encourage other people to look into this because there is so much, but specifically about the history, because there is a lot of history that goes into violence. I want to say, though, that this is a topic that is just not addressed. And if it is, it's poorly covered and very specific and narrow to fit some sort of viewpoints or agenda of some kind. That's not necessarily bad, but there is a lot that is left that is just not talked about. And honestly, after watching a certain video, some things clicked and I realized this is a part of who we are as humans. It's part of mankind. And I believe in dualism, and I believe in the fact that people, humans, are born spiritually dead. And to a degree, violence has always been there, so to speak, specifically because of the fallen nature and the fact that there is, people do wrong, and that there is something there that is keeping us spiritually dead, or that is a part of us when we are born, where we are born spiritually dead. That is just my opinion, though. As far as it, I'm not going to directly say sin makes us be born a certain way. I'm not going to go that far. But I do want to say that violence itself is something that is intrinsic to all of us. And yet it is criminalized. It's talked about very negatively. It's talked about always in the potentials to do harm rather than how it could be used to protect and serve. Since I was in the Army, this whole thing with violence has to do with protecting one's fellow men, the brothers and sisters in arms, and your country, generally speaking. And it was always used in context of like, make the enemy die for their country, don't die for yours. Like using violence in a way to encourage and to defend, but at the same time, you want to be able to back those words up. I scored just below marksman whenever I did any of those, when I was ever at the range having to qualify. Just some old flashbacks there. It's like 1 or 2 points below. Anyway, moving on here. Violence itself is something that is of interest because God the Father, according to the Bible, and I want to say in Judges or First Chronicles, I believe, it talks about Korah and his followers were consumed by fire of God when they offered strange fire to God on an altar. This is around the time of when Moses and Miriam, Aaron, when all of them were there, and there were some people who rose up in rebellion, just saying like, who's Moses? How is he elected to be the prophet of God, the man of God, to lead the people? So, point of case, I think, if I remember correctly, it said that Moses went before God troubled, and God just said, don't worry about this, just have you, your brother, basically your people on one side, and then have Korah and his followers on the other side. And so they offered fire up at the same time, or however that worked. The point is, when Korah and his followers offered up fire, they were consumed. Hopefully this person leaves. Ugh. I was not expecting this at all. Sorry about that. Okay, good. Maybe I don't have to move it. Sorry about that. So violence. God uses it. Now compared to Satan, compared to the devil, because these are all biblical terms. Now, as far as how God addresses Satan himself, I believe is just Lucifer and possibly Beelzebub and a few other names, but I'm really not sure about them because I never did an in-depth study on, Satan, Lucifer. Like, the whole topic of the devil is not something I've ever actually done a study on myself. But, so certain things like names I am not familiar with, unfortunately. Now, I will say, though, when compared to God, as far back as I remember that I looked into, Satan has never been given authority, according to Job, the book of Job, where God specifically said, you are not to lay a finger on him, but you can do whatever you want with his possessions. I am paraphrasing, by the way. According to that, I do not believe Satan has any authority to actually kill anyone. I believe that is up to God and to other people here on earth. However, it is noted that there are safeguards. There is something instilled into each person with morality, right and wrong, where people do not actively go out to kill others. They do not actively go out to take lives. Also, this is a small side point here, but killing and taking lives are very different. Because if you look at video games, you can kill multiple times, but you're never actually taking a life. Like playing Call of Duty or something like that. Now, in real life, when you're actually shooting another person and you shoot them, and since I was in the Army here, just look at it from like a military point of view here. When you are, when you're shooting a terrorist 300 meters out, and you're doing so under duress, under direct fire, and you are returning fire, and you happen to see an enemy go down and they do not move, they do not pop back up, you're taking a life. That's violence right there. That's also a lot more. So, point in case, violence is an application of force, but the direction as well as the specific type of force that is applied really matters, because in order to safeguard your kids and other people and yourself, you have to have safeguards of some kind. Some people are really bad mentors or really bad parents, but they still do somewhat of a decent job by, like, even if they go a little overboard, they just make it very clear, like, this is bad, this is wrong, do not ever do it. I will whatever spank. Spanking comes to mind because, like, 30 plus years ago, that was normal. Just, your kids mess up, you take them aside and you just take off your belt and you just smack them you just smack him a couple times on the butt. I'm obviously toning that down by quite a few notches, but the point in case, disciplining with your belt is something that was the norm back in the day. Now, there were other methods as well, but I'm not going to go down that, But, point in case, violence is something that is basically force that you're used to harm, so to speak. But I am straying a little off topic, so apologies there. I am distracted with all these vehicles up and down the road here, so sorry. As far as with the church, Jesus, the most notable example where Jesus himself was involved in, and I do want to mention this with clearing out the temple, specifically had to do with his father being slandered, misrepresented, and with finances like bartering, selling, buying, trading, debts, like measuring debts and recording them inside of his father's home. And that is what made Jesus angry enough to use force to drive out the livestock, to flip over the tables, and possibly driving out people themselves. It's really hard to say, because we don't ever actually see or hear Jesus laying hands on other people and with violence and force. We don't. We just hear about him clearing out the temple, and it's very vague about that. But in all honesty, if he was a carpenter, he has the strength to back that up. I do want to make a noticeable distinction about the angel in Revelation that's talked about as the one who reaps. His job is specifically to reap the souls, to take lives, so to speak. And I do not know if it's one angel or more than one angel, but I believe when it comes down to death, there's a lot that's tied up directly with this angel that is talked about in Revelation. So there should be wonder about whether or not there is violence assigned to that angel as well. As far as definitions go, you can use whatever definition you want, but I'm generally sticking to applied force. Something along the lines of that, where force is used and applied that is meant to harm or hurt, because this is not exactly controlled. I admit it's not exactly controlled, but where this ties in with the church and with this particular video is of interest, because men are often demonized and told that they're evil simply because they're men, and a lot of this is tied directly to violence and force that men supposedly can do and have. This is not entirely true, because both sexes can and have done great harm to each other and to themselves and to their kids. It's been recorded that women have gone out and killed their own babies and had their husbands murdered. I mean, sure, husbands may be physically stronger, but women are capable of harm and of killing as well. I mean, they have strength too, but just because it's not the same as men does not mean that they are incapable of violence themselves. This is something that's a part of everyone. And knowing how to apply this violence, to apply this strength, and having boundaries and safeguards, and also being aware of what the potential looks like, you can find ways to channel and use all of this constructively. Inside the church, though, I believe the best thing you can do is just simply give people the tools and advice that they need so that they can use this appropriately and in ways to defend, and in ways to basically guide and all that. I am private security as of right now, but in a couple days I am leaving my job, so I'm not really sure what I'll be doing after that. But there's a lot here that I've thought about and have looked into, because becoming the best at this job, it's frustrating, it's hard, and the application of force is very strenuously applied with this position here, because you have to start, and this ties in with cops and police officers, by the way, but applying the lowest amount of force possible is basically mandatory. Like, you almost have to be a pacifist when approaching something like being a police officer or private security. I'm not saying you should, but I'm saying, like, the application of force is just basically at the floor. You never respond with violence unless someone's life or your life is directly about to be harmed or is being harmed. You should do everything you can to get away from the attacker and all that. So, I still haven't hit every point that I was trying to make, so apologies there, but when kids are growing up with a wrong definition of masculinity and of men, a wrong definition of violence and force and all of that, they're going to grow up in the same way that I did, with seeing as men are evil, men are wicked, being a man is awful, and in some cases being told you should just kill yourself or die is completely the wrong answer. And there's very few tools to actually counter any of this. There are biblical tools on how to grow up to be the right kind of man, sure, but there's nothing that really helps a young man find his path and to channel all of this energy, all of this force, and all of this violence that they may be experiencing or wanting to feel or whatever. like all of this energy, there needs to be safeguards, and I'm just simply not seeing the church address this issue that is growing more and more important. And when you take a look at the youth today, you will have your answer as far as how many of these young people are dealing with this and how they're responding to all this violence. How they're responding to what is in their life. In some cases, very violently. And I'm talking about everything from school shootings to those who are attempting to change their sex because they hate themselves. There is quite a variety of ways. Now, there are bullies too, but that's generally because they've been abused and all that, and they just want to see other people suffer, or something along the lines of that. I was bullied as a kid too. That's not, that's quite annoying. That's quite frustrating, but they're a part of everything as well. And in some cases, they are some of the best examples of violence because it encapsulates so much. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of dumb decisions made because of these feelings and emotions. All right, what time is it? Got to wrap things up here. God talks a lot about violence, but not in the ways that you would suspect or think about. Giving people the know-how and the tools in order to apply it correctly is something that you can you can find if you actually look and read between the lines, so to speak. There is a lot of discernment that needs to go into play with recognizing any of this and knowing how this fits you or those in your life that you are trying to help. Anyway, I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments on this because there is a lot here, and I'm basically just skimming the surface here and avoiding history because, believe me, when it comes down to the history, I know one of the first things people are talking about is the Crusades. When people believe so much about their faith and all that, they take up physical action. That ties in with the radicals, that ties in with a lot of other directions here that I would rather not go in. I myself have done a little research into the Crusades, but I'm not really interested there. It does not directly impact my life, and I've got so much other things to deal with. Like me leaving this job soon and taking a breather because I need a break. Private security is very stressful, and there's a lot that can go wrong, and there's a lot that does go wrong, and there's a lot of problems that you need to deal with depending upon the site. This particular site here, straight ahead to the left, to the right, there's a building here that I'm managing, and I do have to go in a few minutes, but I wanted to make this quick video here because this is one of the most stressful professions I've ever been a part of and have ever seen. Conflict, it will happen, and you need to have the tools to know how to handle it, and especially when you are being recorded. All right, with that said, I'm done. Wish y'all a happy morning and good rest of your day.